So in part 1 of this dry point print process, I took a drawing and traced it with graphite on tracing paper. Then I transferred the drawing to my Tetra Pak plate I cut from a chickpea carton, and finished up by etching the transferred drawing on the plate. Before I do anything else, I need to prep my paper. I'm using 250 GSM Fabriano Unica printmaking paper because it's 50% cotton fiber content. I've cut the paper to the size that fits in my small press, and I'll soak it in the water for 30 minutes to an hour. Once an hour is up, I'll place the paper in between some folded printer paper and put that in a folded towel. Then I'll put the tray I used for the water back on top of the stack. This will squeeze out the excess water while we work on the plate. I find it useful to wear nitrile gloves and do the inking on a piece of 1/4 inch thick clear acrylic to make cleanup easier. Let's get out the ink. I'm using Akua Intaglio ink in carbon black. It cleans up easily with soap and water, which I prefer. To scrape up some ink, I'm using a leftover piece of mat board, but thick cardstock, cardboard, or a palette knife would also work. My goal as I apply the ink to the plate is to make sure I've gotten ink down into each etched line. So I smooth the ink over the surface in one direction, then turn the plate and smooth the ink in a different direction. After the plate has been well coated, I get the ink jar out of the way and will start removing as much ink as I can. I'm using scrap printer paper here to rub off the ink that's on the silver parts of the plate, so by the end only the etched lines will be inked. At first, there's a lot of ink to remove. I found it's best to fold up the printer paper, and when a side is full of ink, I unfold it to find an uninked section and refold it with the clean side out. That way you can use every section of the page before moving on to a new sheet of paper. It takes a while, but eventually you can see the etching lines are more distinct and the silver of the plate starts becoming more visible. When I get toward the end of removing the extra ink, I start to focus more attention on wiping off sections without etching lines. I pay particular attention to wiping off the edges of the plate. All right, I think I'm there. Now I can set up the press. I'm using a small portable press that I can clamp to the side of my work table. It's made by the Open Press Project and is their larger press that can make a postcard-sized print. Over top of the registration grid, I'm laying down a piece of tracing paper. This will help keep the press bed clean of any ink while leaving the grid visible. I'm positioning the inked plate in the center of the press bed so I get the best chance of evenly distributing the pressure. Then I place the damp paper over the inked plate, trying to get the positioning right before I set it down. I have 2 blankets for this press, one thin and one thick. I put the thin one down first and leave a bit of the top of it hanging over the edge of the press bed. Then I lay down the thick one. Now I'm easing the press bed underneath the roller. Here's a side view of the press to show you how the roller looks. When it's in place, I hold the blankets down on the press bed with one hand and slowly turn the crank with the other. Let's see how the print looks. It's not too bad. As I look the print over, I can tell that my etching lines weren't quite deep enough to really hold the ink. But I am pleased with how clean the white parts of the print look. Since we've got the press set up, I want to see what more pressure from the press's rollers will do with the remaining ink on the plate. I reposition the inked plate, put down another piece of damp paper, and lay each blanket down on top. Once I guide the press bed under the roller, I tighten down the wing nuts on each side to give me more pressure. I slowly crank the press bed through. Let's check on the print. The extra pressure did eke out another print without having to re-ink the plate. But as you can see, the contrast is way down. Also, there's a grayish tinge to the whole print, which is the ink that I wasn't able to completely wipe away from the plate. One of the things I enjoy about the drypoint etching process is getting to see how a drawing changes while transforming it from pencil lines to printed ink. It gives me a new perspective on what details of the image are important for me to get exactly right, and which ones can shift into something different. These print pages are still quite damp, so I'm putting them between a couple pieces of dry printer paper, and I'll set the pan back on top of them. This way they'll be able to dry flat, with no curled edges. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy these videos, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.